I ended up buying that group of businesses for £1. And for £1, I ended up with a franchise business. I ended up with 50% of a business, a digital marketing business in Australia. So I had this whole collection of businesses. And then I sold that to one of the two companies that my friend had suggested I contact for £1.25 million. In 2016, I was invited to a dinner. And it was like a business dinner. I knew the people inviting, but I didn't know anyone else. And I'm not really a big networker. I don't sort of go to networking things, but I thought it's a nice venue. Why not? I'll go along. And before we went through to eat, I was talking to someone, and we were sort of discussing sort of businessy things. And he said, "Oh, you must have come across this business in the Midlands called Creare." And I hadn't. I'd never heard of them. He said, "Yeah, they're private equity owned. They're going great guns. Amazing business, digital marketing business, great business." And I made a note on my phone of the names. I thought I'm going to forget that name. It's unusual. It was a made-up word, I think. And because I had a similar business, and I thought, well, maybe they'd buy. They're private equity backed. They'd buy, and private equity backed businesses are acquisitive businesses because that's how private equity grows. It's not just the organic growth; it's the acquisitive growth. So I thought I could sell them my similar business, and I sent off in the taxi on the way home that night. I sent an email to the people that I was working with, the advisors that I was working with, and I said, find out who owns this company, Creare, and pitch them our business. Within 24 hours, she came back to me and she said, it's owned by Sovereign Capital Partners, and they have no interest whatsoever in buying. In fact, I get the feeling that they want to sell. So I went onto LinkedIn, put the company name into LinkedIn, and found that I was connected to their marketing director. Didn't know the guy, just, any of you got thousands of LinkedIn connections, you don't know them all, do you? So I sent him a message, and I said, we're in the same space. I think it could be good to connect. Also, always very interested. If you come across a similar business that might be interested in selling. Now, that's a really, really good approach. If you're interested in buying a particular business and you're with the owner, don't say, do you want to sell? Say, do you know anyone who might want to sell? Now, they might immediately say, well, you're talking to them. Or a little bit later, they might come back to you and say, you said you're looking for businesses. Might be interested in looking at ours. So you don't make that absolute direct approach because that creates sometimes some antagonism. So you go sort of sideways approach. So Tom, the marketing director, came back to me and he said, you need to be speaking to Kevin, the CEO. So he put me in touch with Kevin, the CEO, and Kevin, the CEO, said, we could be interested in an exploratory conversation. But you don't want to be talking to me, you want to be talking to Alan, the chairman. So I went to meet Alan, the chairman, on a motorway services on the M1, all the finest venues. And Alan was there and Kevin was there, and they said, look, our owners, it's a 5-year fund. We're coming up to the end of the 5 years. The business was bought to do a buy and build. We never did the buy and build for whatever reason, and now they want to dispose of the business because they have to, because it's coming up to the end. I don't know if you know how private equity works, so all the investors put the money, pension funds, high net worths, put the money into the fund. Maybe the promise of the fund is a 2x return, and we're going to be buying businesses in the letting agency space, and they go out, they buy the businesses, and then at the end of the 5 years, they sell the businesses on. All the money from the sale of the business goes back in the fund, distributed out, and hopefully everyone's got a 2x return on their money. So it's very simple, really. So, he said, look, you've got to come to London and you've got to meet the private equity owners. So I went to meet the private equity owners, and they said, yes, we are interested in selling the business. Make us an offer. Now, we all know what to do when someone says, make us an offer. We say, I'm sorry, that's not our policy. I said, I'm sorry, that's not my policy. You need to tell me how much you need for the business. And it transpired over a couple of conversations that they were actually backs against the wall. They needed just to get rid of this because they need to close the fund. And I ended up buying that group of businesses for £1. And for £1, I ended up with a franchise business. I ended up with 50% of a business, a digital marketing business in Australia. So I had this whole collection of businesses. And I had 85 staff in an office in Rugby. So I went along to meet all the staff in Rugby. That was an interesting conversation because they kind of knew that the business hadn't been doing well because the toilets hadn't been fixed and the microwave in the kitchen had broken. And they knew that things weren't quite right. And then I was introduced, and of course you're immediately the big bad wolf. What's this guy going to do? Are our jobs safe? Are our jobs safe? And the actual no, your jobs aren't safe because the business is making a loss right now. It was making a £300,000 a year loss. Now, the rule of thumb is you never buy a business that's making a loss unless you can answer two questions. The first is, number one, why is it making a loss? The second is, do you know how to fix it? You're watching this because you're interested in buying a business. So get my business buying toolkit free of charge. 17 downloads, videos, reports, and my books as well, completely free of charge. The link is right below it. Now, if you know why it's making a loss, you know how to fix it, you're going to be okay. But if you don't know the answer to those two questions, you've got yourself a little bit of a problem. But I knew what the problem was. I knew how to fix it. And I knew that we had to shrink down the staff. We had to move out the larger offices and do all of these things. Now, I had an anti-embarrassment clause in the contract. Now, this might be something that you encounter. So an anti-embarrassment clause is where if I sell you this business for practically nothing, I don't want you to embarrass me by selling it on to someone else next week and making me look foolish that I sold it to you for nothing and you just made a fortune next week. So it is quite literally, do not embarrass me. So the anti-embarrassment clause meant that I couldn't sell it, I couldn't restructure it. Benefit of hindsight, just for everyone's benefit here. I'd be fine, I'm not going to sell it, but restructuring, I would always make sure I'm allowed to restructure. So restructuring is basically using legal processes to take the good bits out of the business and collapse the bad bits and the bits that you don't want. So around about the time I was buying it, I went to see a friend who owns a digital marketing business in Manchester, and I said to him, look, confidentially, I'm buying this business in Rugby. Who do you think would buy this business? And he gave me the names of two companies, one in the Northwest and another one in Manchester. So I went and had meetings with these two companies and ended up doing a deal with one of them. But I couldn't complete the deal until the 6-month anti-embarrassment period was over. I then restructured the business, and this sounds incredibly aggressive, but aggressive in sort of legal and financial terms, but I basically took the bits of the business that I wanted. So the business, just to give you the numbers, was doing 5 million of annual revenue. Okay, 3 million of that was recurring. So recurring revenue, contracted, SEO, if you know what SEO is, search engine optimization, that type, Facebook ads, that sort of thing. The other 2 million was transactional. So it was one-off. It was web design, it was social media, video production. Those departments were making a loss. Web design, highest paid people in the company, making the biggest loss in the company. Social wasn't making any money, video wasn't making any money. So I went at it with a bit of a hacksaw. And I closed down the video production, I closed down the social media, I closed down the web design. I looked at the very best people in the SEO department, figured out I could outsource a lot of it to other countries. And I ended up with a far smaller office with only 12 people doing the jobs that 85 people used to do, although not all the jobs, because some activities we weren't doing anymore. But now I had a 3 million a year company that was really, really profitable. So we went from a loss to a profit within the space of a very, very short while. And then I sold that to one of the two companies that my friend had suggested I contact for £1.25 million. So the ROI was £1 to 1.25 million. Now you might be thinking, were there legal fees in there? Yes, they were, but that was all covered by the cash flow of the business. And you know, was it a good deal generally? Yes, it was. But what I will tell you, it was stressful. So for 11 months, I thought about nothing else. So you've got to balance off. Sometimes you can buy a business without any money, but you make up for it in additional work. Okay, so you've got to always be mindful of these different things in play. I would never let that put you off, but it's just being mindful that if there's going to be a turnaround, I know that you guys know all about optimizing businesses, but you've got to either implement that yourself or have someone in your team implement it for you. But I like telling that anecdote because it shows what's possible just from having a drink with someone before you go in for dinner, making a note, following up on it, going to the meetings, traipsing around the country, talking to people. Oh, by the way, there were over 20 different shareholders in this business. And I had to go to every single one of those shareholders and persuade them to do the same deal as all the other shareholders. But deals are everywhere. And, you know, we're all here to grow our existing businesses, but I was just talking to someone in the break and who's bought a completely different business in a different sector. So once you've got these skills, you can play with other things. You can say, oh, I've always wanted to own a whatever, and you can go out and do it. So it creates a lot of fun in your life because you become the deal maker rather than the operator. And I think that's a really good position to be in.